My mother works in an office, so this topic is familiar to me. This isn't just a story for the sake of use, it's an experience that thousands of people go through. I want you to learn from it and not repeat other people's mistakes. All names, companies, and addresses in the story are fictional and have been changed.
I was halfway through my second cup of burnt break room coffee when she strutted in like she owned the air we were breathing. Click, clack heels, fake smile lipstick, and a damn laminated flowchart titled Ops Overhaul, Phase 1. I'd seen PowerPoint warriors before, but she had the full set. MBA from somewhere expensive, fresh blowout, and a stare that scanned every desk like she was hunting for inefficiency. The same desks we built with duct tape and sleep deprivation after the 2017 server meltdown she read about in a footnote. "Let's talk value streams," she chirped. "Oh, we're talking value now?" I waited until after the sync to ask privately. No attitude, no edge, just one honest question. "Can you tell me why she's pulling twice my salary?" HR blinked once. No hesitation. "She has an MBA, you're just an engineer." And then she added it. The phrase that cracked the last nerve I'd been white-knuckling for the past 4 quarters. "Know your place." I didn't argue. I didn't defend the patents filed under my name or the hours I spent hard-coding rollback protocols while my kid was in the ICU. I just turned, walked down the hallway, and typed up my resignation. 1 paragraph. Time-stamped 9:52 a.m., no flare, no goodbye email, just a .pdf that said everything I needed to say. And, hey, while you're here, if this story hits even a nerve, go ahead and hit that subscribe button and give the video a like. It's free for you and means everything to the team sharing these stories. Don't be 97% of people who forget. Anyway, they thought I rage quit. Truth is, I'd prepped the exit over a year ago. Quietly, strategically. There was no panic when I sent the email, only precision. I'd rewritten my own clearance structure months back, set timers, built bypass failovers tied to biometric tokens that only worked when I was on site. They never noticed the clause in the system logs. Custodian heartbeat required every Monday before 10 a.m. or full system integrity check initiates. I was the heartbeat. And as of 9:53 a.m., that heartbeat flatlined. She didn't even notice the blinking amber status in the bottom corner of the dashboard during her second meeting, too busy outlining her modernization pipeline. I built that dashboard. I built everything they now thought they could just cloud migrate like it was a damn Google Drive folder. The backups she archived, they weren't backups. They were live validation nodes. She just disconnected 3 compliance triggers tied to our core vendor SLA. And still, she smiled like a CEO in training while the room nodded along. That morning, I left with my dignity zipped up in a laptop sleeve. I didn't yell. I didn't slam a door. I walked out like I'd just finished a project. Because in a way, I had. And the next phase? That wasn't mine to manage. It was theirs to survive. To her, it was all tech debt. That's the phrase she used. Like my work was a liability instead of the very skeleton holding their Frankenstein systems together. "Can we just move it all to the cloud?" she asked one morning while sipping on her oat milk latte like this was a Slack thread and not a damn mission-critical ops environment built on 13 years of interwoven contingencies. She called my scripts clunky. Laughed when I explained the fallback protocols weren't visual. Said the CLI looked like something from a hacker movie. This from a woman who once confused a maintenance daemon with a malware alert. She never read the original documentation, because of course she didn't. She thought system architecture was some plug-and-play SaaS dashboard you could learn on YouTube between Pilates and a seminar on emotional resilience in the workplace. I didn't correct her. I didn't offer to help. She'd made it clear my place was beneath her view, so I let her proceed. I watched as she sent an email to IT with the subject line, "Spring Cleaning," and a bullet point that read, "Archive all legacy service functions older than 2020. I watched as 4 dormant security triggers flicked to life. Soft alarms embedded deep in the compliance stack. Silent failsafes I installed after a vendor breach nearly cost us a $6.2 million federal contract. Systems she didn't even know existed started whispering error codes to each other like a nervous breakdown in slow motion. I didn't say a word. I logged in from home, opened the monitoring console, and started pulling time-stamped logs. built a clean chain of custody, screen recordings, access trails, the whole kit. Then I labeled the folder. Critical Layer 9. Do not touch. Not for them. For me. For court, if it came to that. She didn't see the danger, she saw freedom. She strutted through the back end like it was hers to simplify, flatten, eliminate, but she didn't understand the weights, regulatory anchors, vendor hooks, rollback locks, things that existed not because I was too lazy to refactor, but because we'd already lived through hell and engineered a way to never go back. She removed old credentials that were actually credential rings for multi-user restores, killed a sandbox environment we used for air-gapped audits, cut a data bridge labeled obsolete that was in fact our real-time sync buffer for cross-continent redundancy. And still, she smiled. She didn't even flinch when Jenkins failed its first nightly run. Old job, she said. Probably a cleanup task. It wasn't. It was the redundancy verifier, the one that checked all production states against the last clean state hash. When it failed, that was the first domino. Not loud, not visible. But now the system knew something was wrong. It would hold for a little while, long enough for everything to look okay, long enough for the cloud dashboard to say green while the real infrastructure beneath started coughing. She wouldn't feel it yet. Not until the load balancers rekeyed. Not until the logging daemon failed its own identity check and flagged every API call as foreign. The countdown had started. And the worst part? They still thought I was just the engineer. The funny thing is, they thought I'd just walked out. That was the beauty of it. They assumed everything was static, manual, obvious, surface level, but everything I ever built ran deeper, quietly, intentionally, because real infrastructure isn't about being noticed. It's about knowing that if you vanish, the system knows what to do. So when I sent that resignation, 9:52 a.m. sharp, it did more than inform HR I was done. It did exactly what I designed it to do. My ID badge revoked itself. Biometric clearance suspended. SSO token pulled from every endpoint, which meant Layer 1 was clear. And that's what activated Layer 2. They never saw the second layer. It was never documented in any handbook, never listed in Jira or Confluence. It wasn't even under my name. It was buried in a system package labeled Legacy Custodian Protocol, internal, set to run a timed integrity check tied to my presence. Not my job title, not my badge. Me. If I didn't log into the node cluster by 10:53 a.m., 1 hour after the official start of the continuity window, the core servers would initiate a 3-stage audit, not a shutdown, not a wipe, an audit. It was cleaner, more surgical. It scanned for environment drift, configuration tampering, permission mismatches, and when it found them, which I knew it would, it escalated, not to humans, to the system itself. That's the thing about building for scale. You don't just automate for convenience, you automate for survival. Because someday someone's going to make a change they don't understand. And when that happens, the only thing standing between collapse and continuity is the protocol you leave behind. At 9:53 a.m., 1 minute after my resignation hit the server, the heartbeat monitor sent its first failed ping. Stage 1, internal consistency check. Stage 2 would follow in 18 minutes. Cross-node verification and container integrity sweep. Most of it invisible, unless you were watching for kernel log spikes or noticing the sudden increase in telemetry frequency from nodes in our backup region. But they weren't watching. They were probably still clapping over her ops acceleration plan. By the time the dashboard metrics dipped, the process would be irreversible. Not destructive, just corrective. The system would stop trusting its own interfaces, would pause job queues, suspend low-priority tasks, and lock out any identity that hadn't been validated by an active custodian. That custodian was me, and I just walked out with no intention of walking back in. But here's the best part. They had no idea any of this was happening. That's the problem with building things that work. People forget they were ever fragile. She thought my resignation was a win. She never read the script that came after. By 10:00 a.m., I was already home, kettle hissing behind me as I watched the internal cameras buffer, just slow enough to tell me something was starting to crack. But they didn't see it yet. No. Inside that glass box conference room, she stood with her fake smile and her color-coded binders like she'd invented system architecture during a long weekend at Stanford. Legacy is dead, she announced, standing directly in front of the custom dashboard I'd spent 6 months coding from scratch. She didn't even change the color scheme. We're streamlining operations, she said, like it was a TED Talk and not a room full of people who'd worked through Christmases, outages, hurricanes. She passed around a laminated flowchart. Of course it was laminated, titled Ops Simplification Timeline. It was a euthanasia schedule for every back-end process we'd relied on since 2013. API bridges, sunset by Q2. Authoring's, consolidated by end of month. She didn't even know what half the acronyms meant. She was just reciting them like it made her sound technical. One of the junior engineers, Jason, I think, raised his hand and asked carefully, "What about the continuity chains?" She tilted her head like a confused dog. "What about them?" "You know," he said, adjusting his glasses, "if the real-time mirrors drop, those links keep us from—" She cut him off. "We're not running a museum, Jason. Obsolete systems stay obsolete. We move forward." A few people shifted in their chairs. No one else spoke. Behind her, on the wall-mounted server board, my server board, a node blinked amber. One light. Easy to miss. But not if you built it. Not if you knew that one light meant a skipped key sync on a container job scheduled for 9:55 a.m. Every job after that would stall. Every stall would compound. She didn't notice. Too busy asking marketing if they could put this streamlining stuff into a culture deck. The dashboard behind her still looked green. For now. Because visual health indicators don't show you the parts that are holding their breath. They don't show you the trust dependencies, the silent validators, the recursive handshakes happening under the hood, all waiting on one thing, a valid heartbeat from the designated system custodian. That heartbeat? Gone. I didn't need to sabotage anything. I didn't pull a plug or leak a file or go nuclear. I just left. And when I did, everything I designed to require trust, real trust, earned trust, went quiet. It didn't panic. It didn't scream. It simply stopped extending itself. The meeting wrapped with applause. She grinned, thanked them for buy-in, and walked out like she'd just steered a ship through a storm. She didn't know the storm hadn't even started yet, but it had. And it was silent. 10:22 a.m. The amber light turned red. The monitoring node in the old East rack, Node 7, the one I'd quietly wired into the continuity framework after that 2018 failover disaster, spiked its internal alert level, not to some central dashboard, not to Slack or PagerDuty or any of the notification toys they loved so much. It pinged the network internally, looking for my validation signature. It didn't find it, so it began escalating, not all at once. That would have been too easy to fix. It started slow, measured. It flagged its last known checksum, cross-referenced, found a mismatch, triggered the next validation layer. 10:26, the container sync paused mid-cycle. No external alert, just a hold. 10:29, the automated backup job failed its verification stage and tried to retry, twice. Then it flagged its own node as untrusted. That particular job was connected to the compliance snapshot routine. No verification, no legal coverage. But the team didn't know that, because the new dashboard didn't show that. They thought the lights were still green. 10:33, the live batch processing queue, intake jobs, data wrangling, anonymization scripts, locked, hard. Queues froze, incoming data stacked into holding cells with nowhere to go. Any attempt to re-authenticate returned a new message, a message no one had seen before. 10:36, operator identity not recognized. I remember the moment I wrote that line. 5 years ago, during a 3-day offsite where leadership decided disaster recovery was low ROI and slashed our audit budget, I stayed late in the hotel room and wrote a line of code into the executor. If the system detects configuration drift without custodian presence, trigger protection mode. Don't ask for help, just stop. Freeze the jobs, lock the queue, protect the data. It wasn't malicious, it was math. Contingency. I never thought it would activate this way, because I never thought they'd be stupid enough to let someone else tinker with the foundation. But here we were. I didn't get a call. Not yet. Because they didn't even know anything was broken. Not truly. They were still in the honeymoon glow of her briefing, probably still buzzing over their big streamlining moment. But the system knew. And it didn't care about titles or job descriptions or LinkedIn endorsements. It didn't care about MBAs or corporate direction. It only cared about the presence of its custodian, me, and I wasn't there. So it began what it was designed to do: refuse trust. The cascade wasn't dramatic. It was surgical. Background processes stopped trusting scheduled identities. Logging demons rejected access attempts that didn't pass signature thresholds. Credential bridges dropped packets midstream. The building wasn't on fire, but the wiring in the walls had begun to rot, quietly, cell by cell. They wouldn't see it yet, but soon, very soon, the lights they trusted would turn gray, and there'd be no one left with the clearance to bring them back. 10:41 a.m. Knock at the door. I didn't bother checking the peephole. I already knew who it was. There's only one person in a suit bold enough to drive a company car like a bat out of hell across town at that hour. I opened the door and there he stood, the VP of Operations, Marcus. No tie, flushed, jaw clenched so tight I could hear his molars grinding. No hello, no attempt at pleasantries. Just the white-knuckled grip of a man holding a printout like it was a live grenade. "We've got a situation," he said, stepping 1 foot over the threshold like he might storm in if I didn't move. "Nothing's sinking. No batch jobs, no backups. The dashboard looks fine until you touch anything, and then nothing." I just looked at him. Let the silence do what it needed to do. Then he held up the paper. My resignation. Specifically, the last line I'd added at 9:48 a.m. before I sent it off. Effective upon full disengagement. He read it again, slower this time, like it might change on the third pass. "What did you mean by that?" he asked. I stepped aside. "Come in." He walked in like someone entering a bomb shelter after hearing the sirens too late. Stiff, alert, like the walls might collapse. I motioned toward the dining table, cleared except for a closed laptop and a coffee mug that still had steam curling from it. He sat. I didn't. I opened the laptop, pulled up the internal tools he no longer had access to, and slid the screen toward him. "This," I said, "is your status window." He leaned in, eyes scanning the graphs, flat lines, halted jobs, red flags blinking in patterns he couldn't decode. "This isn't sabotage," I said. "This is disengagement." "What does that mean?" His voice cracked a little. "Is this a failsafe? A lockout?" I shook my head. This is what happens when a system that depends on trust stops recognizing the people pretending to own it. He stared at the screen, blinking like maybe the numbers would start making sense if he just squinted harder. "There's no override?" I didn't answer, because that was the answer. He knew it now. Somewhere under the panic and confusion, he'd pieced it together. I didn't build a trap. I built a framework that protected itself in the absence of the one person it was designed to trust. The mistake wasn't mine. It was theirs, for assuming a system built on real care and complexity could be handed off like a gym locker combination. He took a breath, deep and slow, like he was steadying himself before a punch. "So," he asked, "what do we do now?" That part I hadn't decided yet. Not completely, but one thing was already certain. They didn't come here because they respected what I'd built. They came because they were locked out of it, and they didn't have the key. He pulled a thick folder from his leather briefcase and laid it on the table like it was supposed to be some kind of trump card. I recognized it immediately, my original employment contract, bound in those cheap plastic sleeves they used when HR still cared about appearances. I hadn't seen it in years. Didn't need to. I already knew what he was flipping to. Page 17, bottom paragraph. His finger landed right on it, tracing the sentence like a man trying to translate ancient scripture. System-level operational privileges retained under Technical Custodianship Clause 14b, revocable only with joint authorization from custodian and senior governance officer, or upon full system recertification, ETA 12 weeks minimum. He read it out loud, slowly, like he needed to hear the words to believe them. Then he looked up. "You did this on purpose?" I met his eyes, not with anger, not with smugness, just clarity. "No," I said. "You did." His mouth opened slightly, then shut again. He looked back at the clause, scanning it for a loophole that wasn't there. The language was clear. I'd written it myself, with legal's blessing, during a board-level crisis 5 years ago when a vendor nearly took down our infrastructure over a misflagged permissions change. The board had panicked. I had offered them peace of mind. They had signed. Clause 14B was meant to be a safeguard. Not for me, not even really for the company, but for the system itself. For the continuity of service, for the integrity of the architecture we'd nearly lost once and swore we'd never risk again. But they'd forgotten. Or maybe they never really understood. He exhaled hard through his nose, flipping back a few pages like it might help. Like somewhere in the legal forest there was a magic bullet clause that would nullify the entire situation. Why didn't anyone flag this? He muttered. I didn't answer. Because they had. At least 2 junior legal assistants had emailed about it during the leadership transition, asking if system custodian transfer procedures needed to be enacted. The emails were ignored because they assumed, like she assumed, that I was replaceable. That was the rot. Not arrogance, but laziness. He sat back, rubbed his temples, and whispered, 12 weeks? If you start now, I said. He looked at me again, eyes heavier now, not angry, not accusatory, just tired. And if we don't? I didn't respond. I didn't need to. Everything they touched would keep failing, quietly, consistently, in ways that wouldn't make sense until the lights dimmed and the logs filled with red lines no one knew how to read. And still, this wasn't revenge. I hadn't triggered anything. I hadn't sabotaged or inserted a kill switch. I'd simply followed protocol. One they signed, one they shelved, one they forgot, and now they were living inside the consequence of their own shortcuts. He closed the folder with a dull slap and stared at the wall, then finally asked, what would it take to fix this? I'm not coming back as staff. He didn't flinch, didn't protest, just waited, pen poised, notepad already out. His silence told me everything. He'd already made peace with the loss of control. He just hadn't expected the invoice. Consultant, I continued. Quarterly contract. Renewable, not permanent. My rate, my terms. He scribbled. Full autonomy. I choose the projects I touch. Scribble. No HR oversight. They don't contact me. They don't process anything. I work through ops directly, with a one point of contact. You. He nodded. All system modifications must go through peer review. No unilateral deployments, no last-minute hotfixes from junior devs trying to impress someone in a blazer. Every push gets flagged. My sign-off required. I paused. And she's gone. Out of infrastructure, no permissions, no project input, no system-level access. She wants to optimize something? She can make a spreadsheet about it. He didn't look surprised. He just added that line without blinking. The fear was gone now. This wasn't about panic anymore. This was acceptance. This was cleanup. She'll be reassigned, he said almost too quickly. I'll handle it. I watched him write it all down like he was drafting a treaty. A kind of quiet surrender, not with banners and speeches, but with careful language and underlined terms. This wasn't about punishment. It was about structure. Finally, everything I asked for served the company. Everything stabilized the architecture. Everything ensured we'd never end up in this situation again. But it only worked if I was in control. He tapped his pen, took a breath, then asked, "When can you come in?" I looked at the clock on the microwave behind him. 11:08 a.m. The window hadn't closed yet, but the logs would be a mess. Stuck queues, failed jobs, an authentication system trying to handshake with a ghost. 20 minutes, I said. Have security ready. I want my badge restored, temp issued if needed, console pre-cleared, no onboarding tour, no HR forms, just access. He stood up, folder under one arm, contract notes in the other. I'll call the front desk. I opened the door for him. As he stepped out, he turned back. We thought you were being dramatic when you left. I gave a small shrug. You thought wrong. And with that, the door clicked shut behind him. It wasn't personal. It wasn't vindictive. It was protocol. And now, finally, they were ready to follow it. 11:20 a.m. The lobby was dead quiet. Not the usual hum of keyboards or passive-aggressive typing. Just stillness, a kind of corporate paralysis where even the overhead lights felt dimmer, like the building itself was holding its breath. The receptionist recognized me immediately and didn't even try to stop me. She just handed over a fresh badge, white, temporary, no department listed. She didn't ask where I was headed. She already knew. I stepped into the main ops floor. Monitors were on but frozen, dashboards idle, metrics flatlined. The silence wasn't peace, it was failure dressed in silence. You could feel the discomfort radiating from the screens like static. She was at her desk, posture rigid, eyes locked on the wall monitor. A single blinking message glared back at her in angry red font. Custodian signature required to restore authority. That line hadn't changed in 6 years. I'd written it late one night after a particularly vicious session with a vendor who thought overriding audit trails was a speed improvement. I embedded that line so no one could bypass it, no matter how loud they yelled. Her mouse hand hovered over the screen like she could will it away, but she couldn't. She didn't even notice me walk in until I was beside the main console. I didn't look at her, didn't speak, just pulled the new badge from my pocket and tapped it against the reader. 2 seconds. That's all it took. The lights behind the screens pulsed. One after another, the dashboards came alive. Metrics resynced, log trails flushed and rebuilt. Automated batch jobs picked up mid-cycle like they'd just been on a coffee break. The heartbeat monitor turned green. And the system, my system, began breathing again. She turned to say something, eyes wide, maybe hoping to explain or recover whatever dignity she thought she still had. I stopped her with a glance. Not sharp, not cruel, just final. You'll need certification to touch this again. That landed. She didn't argue, just looked down, lips pressed tight, hands folding into her lap. The others on the floor didn't clap, didn't cheer, but they watched. And in their silence was something more important than applause. Recognition, not just of me, of the system, of the invisible weight behind everything they'd taken for granted. I didn't linger. I ran a few diagnostics, signed back into the core validator, and initiated a clean recovery batch. Then I flagged every failed process since 9:53 a.m. and sent the report to ops. Subject line: disengagement window, post-mortem. Then I logged out. No speeches, no gloating, just the hum of the systems following the rules again. Mine. 1 month later, a memo hit every inbox on the ops and dev sides of the house. Subject: revised continuity protocol. The opening line read, effective immediately, all critical infrastructure operations will be governed under certified custodianship authority. It didn't mention me by name. It didn't need to. Everyone knew. There was no all-hands meeting, no round of applause, no apology, just a quiet update to policy, 3 clicks deep in the internal wiki that rewrote the power structure of the entire department. I got the real confirmation 2 days later when Marcus, still VP, now noticeably quieter, pulled me aside after our weekly sync. We were standing near the vending machines. I was reaching for tea. He waited until no one was around. She's transferring, he said, out of infrastructure, quietly. No gloating, no explanation, just an ending. I nodded. That was enough. That afternoon, I sent my first formal invoice under the new contract. Quarterly retainer, as agreed. I itemized it down to the minute. Line 3, custodial resumption, triggered by negligence rate, premium status, paid within 12 hours. No revisions, no back and forth. They processed it before the ink dried. I didn't say anything about the past month. Not to her, not to HR, not even to the engineers who suddenly looked at me like I was some mythical creature who'd fought a dragon and returned with its bones. But they remembered. They remembered the moment it all began unraveling. They remembered who rebuilt it. And they remembered the line that started it all. She has an MBA, you're just an engineer. Now, that engineer doesn't ask for access. She grants it. And when I walked out that evening, the new badge clipped to my coat caught the light just right. Gold trim, no department listed, no expiration. Just one title, custodian. That was enough.
그 짐을 또 들고 다시 철수 해서 여기 늑도 방파제로 왔어. 아침에 등산만 했다. 등산만.
원희 물결표님이 만만한 게 늑도 키키키.
만만한 게 늑도.
아지님이 지금 다리가 고장난 듯합니다.
다리만 고장났습니까? 허리도 아플 건데. 어?
원희 물결표님이 누나 그거 머리에서 그린 시켜서 그래.
아니야.
원희 물결표님이 아니다 암시해봐 괜찮아져 키키요.
아니야.
낚시 좋아지니님이 아그티.
이 낚시 장비, 밑밥, 낚시 가방, 방송 장비, 무게가 어마무시했어.
머리가 고장난 듯합니다. 낚시 좋아지니님이 머리.
심각한데? 그게 고장났으면 심각한 건데? 어? 아니, 이 양반은
낚시 왔다시다.
화장실 따시지.
낚시 좋아지니님이 화장실 키키키키요.
아니, 이 양반은 김밥 가지러 보내놨더만 화장실로 튀어? 어우, 나는 추워 죽겠는데.